We speak about corruption this morning. I will be highlighting them just before we begin our discussion, but that's basically in the Standard and the Sunday Nation. We'll talk about them extensively. Right. Before then, let's take a look at some of the stories we have for you this morning. Now it's back to default setting as anti-graft war begins. A group of Western Kenya MPs now say fight against corruption is tribal. And the government plans to phase out 14 Sita Matatus, draws opposition and divides key sector players. Right, let's begin this morning with these stories. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has yesterday announced that the fight against corruption in the country had registered remarkable achievements after the anti-graft body recovered some 488 million shillings lost through graft. Now, the commission's chairperson, retired Archbishop Eliud Wabukala, said that EACC was in the process of tracking 14 illegally acquired public assets estimated to cost 2.3 billion shillings. Oko Kusa with that report.
Speaking in Vihiga County during celebrations to mark the International Anti-Corruption Day, Wabukala disclosed that the Commission had made an application in court seeking the preservation of assets estimated at 2.6 billion shillings.
Last year, we took public assets, which people had taken worth 2.3 billion. We also recovered cash, 488 million. We also looked at preserved assets worth 2.6 billion.
He said that through 12 proactive covert investigations, EACC had managed to avert a possible loss of more public funds, estimated at 4.7 billion shillings this year. Wabukala further revealed that the Commission had finalized 183 files on corruption and economic crime and forwarded the same to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Out of which 135 were recommended for prosecution. 14 were for administrative action and 34 for closure. The Commission forwarded 4 files on ethical breaches to the DPP. 49 cases were finalized in court, resulting in 39 convictions.
Vihiga County Governor Wilbur Tichilo and his Kisii counterpart James Ongwae, who attended the event, called on the government to deal ruthlessly with those found culpable of graft.
Mimi naonelea lazima tubadilishe sheria zetu ili kwamba ufisadi iwe capital punishment. Ukipatikana na ufisadi, capital punishment inasema kwamba ufungwe maisha ama unyongwe.
Oko Kusa, NTV.
Now, as the country marked the World Anti-Corruption Day yesterday, President Uhuru Kenyatta's second term in office has been rocked by a series of corruption scandals, with taxpayers losing billions of shillings in stolen public funds. In 2018 alone, at least 5 major scandals have been unearthed, bringing to the fore the extent to which corruption has permeated the highest level of the government, and we are going to take a look at some of those. Right, let's begin with the National Youth Service Scandal 2. And the National Youth Service Scandal 2, known as NYS Season 2, which has allegedly seen Kenyans lose at least 9 billion shillings from the public coffers. Over 40 individuals are already facing various charges over the scandal, including former Youth and Gender Principal Secretary Lillian Omolo and former NYS Director General Richard Dubai. Also implicated are 3 companies. According to the DPP, 8 commercial banks pleaded guilty to facilitating the multi-billion scandal at the NYS and have entered a plea bargaining agreement with his office to pay 300 million shillings fine after the Central Bank of Kenya penalized the banks for violating financial transaction rules. Now, the 5 banks handled a total of 3.5 billion shillings from the National Youth Service. The case will be mentioned on February 1st next year during the pre-trial conference. The second one we are looking at this morning is the Kenya Power and Lighting Company. Then came to the scandal at the Kenya Power. Now, Kenyans are said to have allegedly lost about 470 million shillings, just 30 million shy of their $500 million mark, in procurements of defective transformers, and there were alleged irregularities in pre-qualification of the 525 companies for labor and transport contracts through the current and former senior managers at the company. The case currently pending in court. So the KPLC boss, that's Ken Mijungu, relieved of his duties, and Ben Chumo, also a former boss at KPLC, linked to the case together with 8 other senior officials. Now the case is expected to be heard between the 17th and 19th of this year. That's this month. Let's now move to the maize scandal. The country is also coming to terms with the alleged loss of 1.9 billion shillings at the National Cereals and Produce Board. This scam was brought to light when NCPB MD Newton Terrell resigned. 5 senior other managers were also suspended, and 59 members of staff put under investigations. 152 people, mainly NCPB officials and unscrupulous traders, are currently under investigations and face possible prosecution. A well-connected couple of traders, some of whom are not registered as farmers, were accused of supplying large quantities of cheap imported maize at the expense of the farmers who were turned away at the depot. The NCPB still owes maize farmers approximately 2.1 billion shillings. And the largest or the latest of the scandals that has rocked the country, that's the Kenya Pipeline Company. Investigations are currently underway over the disappearance of more than 21 million liters of fuel at the KPC, which claim either it was spilled or it was stolen by vandals worth at least 2 billion shillings. Incidentally, it's not the only scandal at the Kenya Pipeline Company. The DPP has already approved 3 charges against former KPC Managing Director Joe Sang and 5 others in the case. Now, KPC has indicated that 7.2 million liters spilled were worth some 4.4 million, or worth some 4.4 million were stolen. In a resolution by the board, oil marketers were allowed to conduct a forensic stock audit by December 31st to ascertain this claim of the spillage reports. Now, KPC board has since appointed Hudson Andambi as its interim MD. So many scandals in one year, and still in 2018, the ghost of corruption came calling in a case of the same script, different cast. The National Youth Service was once again at the center of a multi-million shilling scam. In another family affair that spotlighted the Ngiritas as opposed to the Gedis, and put another PS charged with the accounts of the institution on her defense, and again the role of the banks in facilitating these questionable multi-million shilling transactions. No questions asked came to light as similar themes played out in the emerging details of another scandal at the National Cereals and Produce Board, but with President Kenyatta having vowed to change the game by appointing Nurdin Haji to head the prosecution office. The question becomes, will this story end?
It happened just as the trial court acquitted former Principal Secretary Peter Mangiti and 22 others of charges related to the theft of 791 million shillings from the National Youth Service. Barely had the newly appointed Director of Public Prosecutions, Nurdin Haji, settled in, then it emerged that more monies had been stolen from the state body. The family name at the center of this new scam was not Gedhi but Ngirita. Businessman Ben Gedhi, if you will recall, is the man who jointly with his sister and mother stand accused of benefiting to the tune of hundreds of millions from the NYS-1 scam. Also at the center of that scam was hairdresser Josephine Kafura, whose explosive allegations implicated then Devolution Cabinet Secretary Anne Waiguru.
Where did you take the money that you looted from NYS? That's the question you need to answer to this committee.
How many bags did you use that? How many bags?
3 bags.
And you're carrying the 3 bags alone to the quarry?
I would carry them, then transport them to the quarry.
1 bundle of $1 million is about 1 kilo. So if you have 100 million, it's 100 kilos. And I told you, 1 jerry can of water, 20-liter jerry can is 20 kilos. So I asked you, are you saying that you can carry 5 jerry cans of water?
End of September this year, the EACC reported that the allegations made by Kafura were bereft of truth, as there was no evidence to support them. And with the political winds having shifted,
we've agreed that we let bygones be bygones. We hope that this matter, facts are going to come out in the process of the investigations which are being carried out by competent authorities, and we really want to know where the public money went to.
Will it be a case of justice delayed or justice denied? And while Waiguru can now claim innocence following the EACC's dismissal of Kafura's claims, what can be said of the banks who in both cases facilitated the unprocedural withdrawal of huge sums of taxpayer money?
We are right now negotiating a plea bargaining agreement with Family Bank. And you know, in plea bargaining, you start by pleading guilty, isn't it? You agree that you made that crime.
Just as in NYS 1 and 2, the probe into the payment of 1.9 billion shillings to dubious traders at the expense of maize farmers by the National Cereals and Produce Board also bore the same themes. One family, a mother, her daughters and a son, none of them registered farmers, made as much as 785 million by selling maize to the NCPB in the 2017-18 season. Investigations by the EACC revealing that they colluded with the NCPB officials.
This is the process we are saying was infiltrated by traders and other people to the extent that some people delivered using fake forms.
But these are far from the only corruption cases touching on government agencies in 2018. The National Health Insurance Fund, the Kenya Bureau of Standards, Kenya Power, and soon the Kenya Pipeline Company will all have had their officials paraded in court. And a cursory glance at the newspapers just this weekend will show you just how far the rot has spread. And a reading of the clouds shows that the storm is far from over.
Sasa nimechoka maneno ya kushindanga hapa kila siku kuambiwa ati most corrupt.
Olive Barrows, NTV.
Now, the extent of corruption in the counties came to focus during the Anti-Corruption Day celebrations hosted in Meru, and the Meru Governor Kiraitu Murungi admitted that he is fighting the vice in his county, welcoming the assistance of the relevant anti-corruption authorities. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Vice Chairperson Sophia highlighted the need for EACC to champions to make known the charges and sentences that the various corruption acts attract in order to discourage many from engaging in the vice. Kiraitu hailed the effort by the president in confronting the vice, saying that the president or President Kenyatta owes no one political allegiance and has no future political ambition, making the time right for the government to totally end the vice.
We are here in Meru County. There is corruption. There is corruption here in Meru County. We are not above the contradictions which bedevil the rest of our society. But as the deputy governor has told you, we are doing something about it.
The wife of the governor, anabeba ile password ya IFMIS ya kutoa pesa. And we've taken some governors, unfortunately, former governors to court because of that. And in some counties, bibi ya speaker ndio ana supply maji kwa county. Deputy governor, bibi yake ana supply chai na mandazi. It is very sad. So it's better kueleza hawa when ukipatikana ukifanya hivyo, sentence ni hii.
Tukiwa tumefikiria njia za kujiepusha na ufisadi ili tuweze kufanya nchi yetu mahala pema ama nchi bora ya kuishi, inatubidi sisi zote tuungane tukiwa tunapigana na tutoe ufisadi na tuishi katika maadili mema.
All right, just one more corruption story before we begin our discussion. Police have arrested suspended NHIF Chief Executive Officer Geoffrey Mwangi over the recent scandal that has costed the Exchequer 1.1 billion shillings in contracts for the provision of integrated revenue collection services. The arrest of the CEO, who was sent on compulsory leave last month, was a win for the operation that incorporated the participation of over 30 senior detectives in pursuit of the 20 senior government officials facing the corruption charges. The operation had hit a snag when the 20 had switched off their phones on Friday, dropping off the radar, which made it hard for the detectives to track them. Just 4 suspects remain on the loose in the manhunt as police intensify their investigations. The NHIF CEO had appeared before court on the 26th of November alongside the Chief Finance Director, Wilbert Kulgat, for failing to honor court order requiring him and other officials to cooperate with investigators probing the alleged misappropriation of funds at the fund. So many scandals in just 12 months, and the year has not ended. Perhaps these are the only scandals that we know of. And a good place to begin our discussion this morning on corruption. And my guest this morning is Tom Odege. Tom Odege is the Member of Parliament for Nyatike constituency. We have Senator Samuel Pogisho, who is from West Pokot, and Dr. Shemu Chodho, who is the chairperson of the Kenya diaspora. And I thank you, gentlemen, for coming. And I'd like to begin this discussion on corruption because this is what we're discussing this morning with a question to Shem. I know off camera you told me perhaps you believe that this is not a distraction and it's a real fight on corruption.
Ken, before last week when we were here, Sonko had his program of stopping vehicles from the city center.
Yes.
And I said it's not going to work.
Yes.
I'm glad that
a day later,
we've been vindicated.
Yes.
Yeah, very confidently said
yes.
that.
Yes.
But coming to corruption, it is very unfortunate what we are seeing. I think we must compliment government, the DCI, the DPP, and arms of the EACC too, and the judiciary for what we are seeing. My only hope is that it's genuine, it's non-selective, and it's going to go up to the end so that those who are innocent are not wrongly witch-hunted, but those who are culpable and guilty meet the full force of the law.
Okay, but you said you believe perhaps there could be something more because there's so many scandals in such a short time.
Yeah, there are quite many, Ken, and my concern, and I believe a concern of many Kenyans, is that it should not be, one, politicized. Secondly, it should not be seen to be selective. Okay, there are cases that Kenyans are still waiting for to see being prosecuted to the end so that we know we are truly serious about fighting graft, because it can't be both ways. But at the end of the day, from experiences in other countries, what seems to have worked is dialogue. Let's find a conversation. Of course, at some stage, we must bring a stop to whatever has happened. There is the historical corruption, there is current corruption, there probably will be some in the future. And corruption is all over the world. That's the truth, even in developed worlds. But in those countries, it's brought up to manageable levels. In Kenya, it has gone beyond board.
Okay.
So we must complement what's happening, but let it be genuine, and let's stay the course, and let's not be selective.
Okay. Senator Pogisho, the president has literally been on the warpath, apart from the fact that he raised his hands some time ago and asked, mnataka nifanye nini? I mean, the goodwill that has been seen in the last few months is remarkable. But still, every single day we wake up to another scandal. Are these creations, does it even look real from where you sit?
First of all, good morning. I believe that it's a good thing that we see every day these scandals. they would have gone unnoticed, and that would have been worse. I do believe that by the arrests that we've seen and the information we are getting now about even the possibility of other arrests coming in, it's good that we are seeing these things now, because if they were swept under the rug, which is the case, which the case has been, and we did not get to see these, especially high-profile ones, it would have been worse. I also think that graft has gone into the DNA of some Kenyans, and when it is in the DNA, in the blood, it's difficult to just get rid of it. It's like being an addiction, having an addiction. You know, you really have to go through a process of cleansing, a process of rehabilitation, and so on. You can't believe it, but I think that I do believe that from the time of the handshake, okay, the political will has been able to provide the climate for us to begin to fight corruption. That means that there is an answer in having political will. There is an answer in also confirming that at the political class, we need to begin to address the root of corruption. And I think that it's happening. So we must commend the president for accepting, first of all, that he can expand his political the table, allow more more people into the space, so that now it is possible to have a bigger fight against corruption. I do believe if we had just remained with Jubilee leading and no input from other political leaderships, we might not have gone as far in the fight against corruption.
Okay. And Tom, do you believe as a result of the handshake, we are seeing what we're seeing right now? Perhaps it will be different the way the senator puts it. The handshake now opened up. We have even a better force and better fight against corruption.
It's true we can credit handshake for it, because when you look at the atmosphere in the country, people are relatively calm. We Kenyans are somehow united, and it has given the president now freedom to now crack the whip on corruption, because by the time when we were divided, when the country was divided, there was no way president would have done what he's doing today, because people are going to get where to run to. But currently, if you are caught, it's between you and the cases which are facing you. But the most important thing which you need to bring out clearly is that let Kenyans not politicize this thing, because we are losing our country to corruption. We have to bring a stop to it.
You also think, because I heard some members of the western side of the country saying that this could be political.
When I looked at the MPs who are talking in that church yesterday and were trying to say that those people were simply trying to please their guest, there was nothing in it.
Okay, there was nothing.
There was nothing in it.
Okay. Apart from that, I'd just like to talk about this follow-up question. Apart from the fact that you feel the goodwill that has come with the handshake is helping fight corruption, but do you think they're touching everywhere they need to touch? Because that's also a concern, that perhaps they've not gone, like Shem puts it, that it's not gone to areas that Kenyans need to see touching.
If you ask me, I'll tell you that the start of the corruption war is at the right place.
Okay.
Because we are seeing some heads rolling, and it's rolling from the top coming down.
Okay.
And unlike when the war used to come from down going to top, you look at the areas where you talk of NHIF, talk of KPC, talk of Kenya Power. The bulk of,
traditionally untouchable areas.
Untouchable areas, and those are the areas where the bulk of the monies and the heart of Kenyans are looking for. Everybody in this country are looking for electricity.
Okay.
Everybody in this country is looking for fuel. Everybody in this country are looking for cereals and food. So to me, I think the war started rightly.
Okay. Gentlemen, there's a story that is running now in the dailies that KPC requested for an additional 13 billion shillings to its budget of already 48 billion as a top-up. Then suddenly, the investigators now believe this money is lost. Now, gentlemen, this reminds me of NYS and where we began. We began at 2.5 billion shillings. Right. By the time they were stealing, it was over 20 billion shillings, right? So is that how we are increasingly opening avenue, creating opportunities for these cartels to thrive? The reason why I'm asking that question is because all these scandals are relatively new. I'm going back to think these are institutions that have existed for many, many years. So perhaps because we've not been so serious in the fight, how much more money would have been lost? So that's a twofold question. Let me begin with Dr.
Ken, I'm glad you mentioned NYS. and let's be honest with ourselves, because that's the only way we can remove this dragon in our midst called corruption. Why do I say selective? I would want to believe there is seriousness and dedication to fight graft when the issue of NYS is brought to complete closure. There's the issue of Ruaraka land case, which has even fingered some MPs. Where is that? Let's bring it
senior cabinet.
Let's bring it to closure. There's the issue of Eurobond and others. I appreciate what's happening at the National Serious Board, KPC, NHIF, and others. And that's the way it should be. But please, let's do it all across board. I must also mention that I watched last night the British High Commissioner on one of the stations. And I was happy to hear him say that the British government has brought in also some expertise they have at the High Commission, willing to help government trace where money has been lost. I keep saying, as an informatician, an ICT expert, forensics, money cannot, one, they say money does not grow on trees. Equally, money does not have legs. 100 million shillings or 1 billion shillings cannot just disappear in thin air without a trail and a trace. So with forensic science, if 100 million or 1 billion has been lost, if there's seriousness to get that money, we should be able to find every penny of that money. And I'm glad that the development partners are making expertise available. So my encouragement to the law enforcement bodies, and obviously very few Kenyans would fault the DPP and the DCI for the work they are doing. Let's bring it to the final end. Money cannot just grow in disappear in thin air.
It must be kept somewhere.
Correct. You must be able to trail where it's gone, which account did it go to whom, who are the beneficiaries and what for. It's not possible that money of that amount can just disappear without getting a trail.
Okay.
I think it's true. That is a missing link in all this information. I mean, we are definitely given so much information about who has been arrested, how much money, but we don't have information about what recoverables and the traceability of some of these billions or millions that are there. And maybe that is meant to be information not given out at this moment, but it would be good to know progress. It would be good to know if it's been traced. Because, you know, Wananchi have a way of spreading information. If you don't give us the correct information, then information grows. And some of this information now covers the country. Like we say, you know, so much money has been taken from so-and-so, so much money has been found in so-and-so. But we don't have the way. How do you trace? How does money just disappear? Where does money, you know, we used to be told that 100 million shillings or 2 billion shillings within the month, within the year. Even if you have a magician, you know, to make it disappear, you know, it should still be possible to see your tricks, because I mean, you must take it to some place first of all. There must be some kind of bank or some car or whatever it is so all these things are possible. So we need to find out who is the expert. And this is the question: who is the expert in making stolen money disappear? We find these guys as well. Maybe they're useful people.
Ken, you talked about the sudden increase in budgets, targeting specific areas like NYS. Another one who now was targeting the Serious Board.
Yes.
What I can tell you in the system, in the government, you'll find corruption itself is also networked that way. And before that money is posted to a department, you'll find ranging from the National Treasury to those bodies, the corruption is interlinked. And you'll find when they are making that request and the money is being given to them,
they've already planned how to steal it.
Already it's planted both from the Treasury up to NYS or the Serious Board. Okay. It's not just money given to them without the cartels following it. It's being followed from the budget time up to the time it's going to be consumed. So this is not something which people will just come and say, today we have such a money, we are importing maize, and then they import air. Those people who gave them the money knew very well air will be
supplied.
Imported. Yeah.
Okay. It's very interesting indeed, very interesting, because when you talk about that, what rings in my mind is how the means they go to ensure they steal money. I'm, for example, thinking about occasioning or just creating at KPC, creating something like spillage, and say there's a spillage of this amount every month that we have to cater for, and we're catering for it on this. This is the value of this spillage. I mean, it's remarkable. I don't know what you think, but it's remarkable the extent they go to get this money. Anyone can go.
There's a way in which, right here, we've had assertions that that corruption begins at the budgeting process,
yes,
right from the budget, and so there are people who know how to put things within the budgets. And then, of course, the big tenders, all these huge tenders are already laden with corruption. And so you need to, and I know it's not the job of the DPP to do all these things, but there are people, there are institutions who are responsible there in knowing. And then, of course, there is the obvious thing, which we keep saying, Kenyans know Kenyans. We know each other so well. Right. That if you are to ask an ordinary person in this country, they can tell you that this guy is my neighbor, but within a month he has already relocated from my neighborhood. It's gone into other neighborhoods within a short time. So those are things which we need to begin to pull together. It's the kind of resource that the government requires, the DPP and the DCI require, that kind of teamwork. And that's why it's a call to all Kenyans, first of all, to understand the dangers of corruption. It's a disease. It's a very dangerous disease. It's into you directly. And I think we should just begin to spread that. We should really use more of our energy doing that. And then, of course, it has now cascaded down to the counties. It looks to me that the experts have moved to the counties because it's easy to get the total sum of the county allocations disappear also, and we need to trace down there. Should we have 47 DPPs? Should we have 47 county prosecutors, 47 DCIs, county CIs, so that we have all these guys working also to trace the resources which are disappearing at the county levels. I believe that we have begun this fight, and I think that with the political will that I see now, we should be able to win this fight. Yeah.
Yes, take time.
Ken, while I appreciate the fight and the publicity, the media, the outrage we are seeing, and media exposure of what's going on, I think we may also need to ask how much action is accompanying that exposure. Why do I ask this question? In terms of lifestyle audits, we have spoken about it. Precisely one of the points that Senator Pugisio is raising. Look, it's not unusual. I mean, if you find that you have a neighbor today is living in one part of the town, for example, and tomorrow he moves over to a leafy part of the town, all of a short span of time, of course, neighbors need to query, how did this happen all of a sudden, unless they hit a jackpot. So if we did lifestyle audits, that would help us to capture such culprits. But then again, and my challenge to the members of parliament, what action is being taken to come up with those regulations to do lifestyle audits? It's not enough to complain that there is no guidelines to do it. Who is meant to give the guidelines? So I want to call upon the legislatures that let's help the country. Talking about it is one thing. The DCI is doing his part. The DPP is doing his part as well. But what, as legislators, are they doing about it? Come up with legislation to bring into effect what people are talking about and what the media is exposing and writing about. Okay. Secondly, taking it to the level of county governments. A number of times, and on these benches, there's been talk of how do we improve oversight at the county levels. Information that we have is that there's probably only one because this is meant to be done, I think, by the controller of budget. At that office, you understand there is only one one officer, one auditor, so to speak. Obviously, the one auditor cannot cover 47 counties. We need to find out, one, of course, to improve the internal audit function. Those internal auditors who are based at the county levels, one, they should not be answerable to the governors. I understand they are appointed by the Public Service Board. That automatically makes them answerable to an extent to the governors. They need to be independent of the leadership in the counties. So one is improving the internal audit. Why do I say it's important? Because the external audit, the Auditor General and so on, it comes in at a historical basis, maybe a year or two or even 3 later. So it's not there to know when you're told a road was done here, repaired. There is no way of ensuring that that actually happened. But the internal auditor that's on the ground who would be certifying this. But when that internal auditor in a way is remotely answerable to the chief executive, then there's a problem.
Much out of it.
Yes, but also, Ken, even from the national level, how strong is the internal, the audit function, the monitoring and evaluation function within the controller of budget? And again, this is another area where the legislators can help. If you realize that that office needs strengthening, give the office the teeth and the means and the resources and the goodwill to ensure they do their work, so that we don't just deal with post-events, corruption having occurred. I think it would be more productive to prevent it. It's always said prevention is better than cure.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, unless you have something pressing, I have to take a break.
Let me respond to something.
On the part of legislators, what you're doing. Okay.
I just wanted to say that what's lacking in this country are not laws.
Okay.
What we lack in this country is goodwill. No matter how good we have the laws and the goodwill is not there, the executive will still come and mess everything, every system we have. That's why you'll find the pronouncements are there, but implementation is very poor.
Okay.
The area where we need to focus on seriously is the executive.
Okay.
Because these are the people who are supposed to implement the laws we are making in Parliament, but they are the people who are not implementing these laws. They'll find a way of going around them. Like the NYS we are talking about, in the Parliamentary Committee where I'm sitting in, at the budget point, we refuse these people money and
to increase the
budget.
Yes.
But still they manage their ways and the money, after rejecting what they proposed to us, and diverting that money somewhere else, they still managed to improve that budget when it came from the floor.
Again, I think with due respect to my very good neighbor,
yes,
Mheshimiwa Odege, I do agree. I think we all know one major problem of Kenya is we have good policies and laws, but we don't execute or implement. So that's one side of the story. But in a situation where some people say I don't know whether the reason or excuse, it doesn't matter, but we do not have guidelines. Who will perform this lifestyle audit? How will it be performed? I think that's a genuine question to raise. So my point is that there is no harm coming up with one more effort to streamline, so that we don't give people any loophole to use as an excuse not to get lifestyle audits done. But having said that, it's rather also unfortunate for the a member of Parliament to, it's like being defeatist, to accept that, look, we may make a decision, but somebody else, impendem sipende. Yes, so why then are we in Parliament? Because
let me ask him something.
Yes.
You saw the finance bill.
Yes.
2018.
2018.
Yes.
You know what happened?
Yes.
Everything which we rejected, and the fact that they knew they could time when the quorum is not there in Parliament, they managed to pass all of them. Can you say that was...
I sympathize with Mheshimiwa here, but I think we are accepting then that Parliament has no teeth.
All right. I'd like to talk more about Parliament and what is likely to be done, because one of the things that I want to talk about when we come back is the amount that has been recovered and how it's been recovered. I'd also like to talk about the Auditor General, talking about the facts and the figures. And one of the things that comes out of the Auditor General's report, or rather is translated and suggested out of that, is that despite the amount of money that is being lost, the lawmakers have refused or have been frustrating the Auditor General, in themselves. And the plunder continues. I'd like to talk about that. Stay with us, gentlemen. We are back shortly with our discussion on corruption. And welcome back to AM Live. My guest this morning, Tom Odege, Member of Parliament for Nyatike, Senator Pogishio from West Pokot, and Shemu Chuodho, Dr. Shemu Chuodho, who is the chairperson of the Kenya Diaspora Alliance. We're discussing about corruption, and I'd like to give you some statistics as shown in the Sunday Nation, the Sunday Standard, which was reporting about 1 trillion shilling, shocking numbers in the plunder of a nation. And every year, Chief Government Watchdog, that's the Auditor General, questions the spending of about 1 trillion by ministries and state agencies. And out of that questioning, I'd like to give you some statistics from the Auditor General. 368 billion shillings, sorry, that's the cumulative amount lost by ministries and agencies in 5 years from 2011 to 2016. According to the Auditor General's report, this amount could construct Phase 1 SGR from Mombasa to Nairobi with a balance of 41 million shillings in the account. Sorry. 87% is the proportion of all money spent by the government that cannot be accounted for in the last 5 years. Available Auditor General report also shows that 87% of the total, that means about only 13% is utilized properly. And the top 5 ministries where the plunder occurs most, that is the devolution, agriculture, interior, health, transport, and education. And of course, the auditor, this is summarized by saying that despite costing the taxpayers about 21 million per lawmaker a year to represent them, that's over 290 members of parliament that are there, MPs have continued to water down the Auditor General's report or chosen to look the other way as the plunder of public resources continues. And this is what, Tom, you were trying to explain to us early. Interestingly, this data is captured between 2011 and 2016, right? I don't know if you're reading what I'm reading, this period and the leadership of this country, and now going forward, 2016, 2018. But let me begin with Tom. Why is it so difficult for Parliament to check these institutions? Why is it so difficult? Alternatively, Parliament has decided to look the other way. What is the motivation?
I want to talk about 2 parliaments here.
Okay. 10th and 11th.
Okay. I'll come to that, but let me divide it into 2.
Okay.
I'm 1 year old in Parliament. And I can tell you, before Handshake, there was no Parliament. Anything, whether that or what, which was brought by the government, all Jubilee MPs will toop up and pass it.
Okay.
After the Handshake, now we have a different Parliament, where people can debate freely and have their own way out and discuss things the way they want, and you can see something happening. And this one has not taken around 6 months. We now have, I can tell you the Parliament we have currently, MPs can deliberate very freely. But when you look at the Parliament which we used to have, where you find an MP elected by the people coming to Parliament and saying, we are the government. I don't know when an MP becomes a government. Because when you're elected, and regardless of the party that is just the vehicle you're given to come to Parliament, and after joining Parliament, you are supposed to represent the people who elected you and the interests of Kenyans. That one was not there. So you'll find most of those things, and I want to sympathize with the situation which was there in the last Parliament, because it was wholesomely a Jubilee kind of Parliament. These people were used seriously to support the ills which were being perpetrated by the executive. But if Parliament can be Parliament where people go to Parliament and check on the executive, I can tell you most of these things can be arrested before.
That will not work out.
Yeah,
okay.
But for the period we have been in Parliament where there was strict divide between the Jubilee and the opposition, there was nothing doing. We passed things which you could see yourself. This one cannot work. But because we are Parliament and even in the committees where we were, the chairman we were given in the committee, a chairman will come in the committee and tell you, I was given this committee by the president. I was given this committee by the deputy president, and I have to do what they want. So you look at him now, you are supposed to be in a watchdog kind of committee. You are supposed to oversight some government departments, but you are, in yourself, you have recognized the post was not given to you by your colleagues in the committee, but was given to you by somebody else from the executive, and you want to work for them.
You have to do that bidding,
it has been a very kind of hectic situation in Parliament, but okay. I'm seeing things starting to soften, and hopefully by February we do our work.
Parliament will be Parliament to check. Senator, before you were Senator, you were Member of Parliament, but this is indicting. Let's just go back to Parliament. You can authoritatively talk about also the National Assembly. The fact that there's complaint that Parliament is not aiding also in this war, especially the checks and balances that Dr. spoke about. It's not happening. What's happening in Parliament?
You know, I believe that what my colleague has said here is very true. That again, Parliament is simply an extension of political systems. As you know, leaders of Parliament can mobilize directly based on information they have or the desires of the executive, and that's not actually unique to Kenya. Because you know, you have, for example, the leader of the majority is an extension of the executive. Basically, he has he has to basically make sure that everything that is the government passes. And like he said, he has like in the National Assembly, the leader there has said that I have to use certain tricks to make sure that that my intentions or the intentions of the governments are done. But you know, we also need to know that every 5 years, the turnover of members of Parliament is very high. Very few members of Parliament remain, and the new ones come in, and before they could even learn the ropes, 5 years come, and there's a high turnover. But so we need to also understand what Parliament goes through. I also think that the three arms of government need to work together in this. The Parliament has committees that are watchdog committees. And sometimes these watchdog committees are overwhelmed also by majoritism, or what you call the tyranny of numbers. And so you fail to do your watchdog duties because maybe you're a minority, and you're overwhelmed by the majority. So reports can be defeated, reports can be altered, and things like that. But we need to come to a point where we tighten the rules on how you can change reports. We tighten the rules of what it means, for example, to defeat a report. Does a report mean that you're already cleared of guilt? Does a report mean you're cleared of wrongdoing in the eyes of the law? So we need to understand. We need to actually make sure that we build up the capacity of people in Parliament to understand that when you do a report as a committee, that report is kind of lost, made to fail. It's an indictment on that committee. And I think we should make it look like it's an indictment on that committee, make it strong, so that the committee members know how to take it seriously. If you don't want something in a report, why put it there in the first place? And then go ahead and defeat it. So those are the kind of issues that makes Parliament weak. And Parliament forgets that many times. And then, of course, the mixture that we have, the executive and the legislature, over the weekends, you know, we all mix up. And we all line up together, and all those things. So we want to find out who will tell us if for sure a report has come, and the report says so-and-so is in this report. We are not going back to fight that report again. So we have a number of things that we need to work on. But Parliament has to do this through a change in the way. We've talked about the system, for example. We did prefer those days when it was a parliamentary system. Now it's a presidential system. I was in Parliament during the presidential system, and I know the advantage of that. I also know the weakness of this one. So at one time we may need to rethink what kind of Parliament we want.
Okay, just before I skip to Dr. I'd like to remind you of a report that was also shot down in the Senate the other day. It's the same thing, right? It's basically the same thing, because it said the Roraka Land report was one of the best done reports. But see what happened to it about a fortnight ago.
Yeah, and just look, I mean, how the authors of the report, for example, looked very helpless at the end of it, okay? It's because it's a simple question put. Aye and no. so it's not strictly a vote per se, but it is as many as that opinion say aye, the contribution say no, and depending on the numbers, you know, and of course the voice. So we tend to a very serious matter like that subjected
regardless of the value of that, it doesn't matter. It's down to a question.
Yeah, down to a question.
Daktari.
Ken, you know, I don't know what Kenyans make of it when media reports that 87% of all money spent by government is not properly accounted for in the last to available Auditor General's report. I mean, even as the executive and the political leadership, both in government and in the opposition, how do they feel that only 13% is clearly legitimate spending? Of course, the 87% doesn't say it's all lost. I think the auditor's report, having done a bit of audit training at Price Waterhouse in my earlier years, is just indicating that 87% have got issues that did not totally convince the auditors that were right. It doesn't mean they are wrong. But that's a very scary figure. Let's also go back to the 368 billion that we told was enough to do the SGR from Mombasa to Nairobi and still have 41 billion change. Those of us who are a bit keener also know that when the SGR itself was initially talked about, we were told 80 billion shillings was going to be enough to take it all the way from Mombasa, not just to Nairobi, all the way to the border with Uganda. So even that 3-something-100 billion or something itself was an oversize. I don't think we are trying to sanitize even that SGR resource. I don't think the way it were, and I'm no expert in this area, whether we got value for money for that is itself a question. But let's assume we did get value for money. And I think this is where I still have an issue with the legislators. I think what we are missing solely are what we used to call the seven bearded sisters like. You know, the few members of parliament who would be bold. In many cases, they would probably just do one term because they would stand on the side of the people rather than on the side of the political elite. But the seven bearded figures, sisters, would bring out issues, so Kenyans would get to know. Why do I say this? While I empathize with what the two honorable members are saying, you could be in a minority. Of course, there's a provision to go beyond the ayes and the noes. You can force a vote, okay, if you have the numbers. But apart from forcing the votes, if you are in a committee, you can also record reservation. So if you don't agree with what the committee decides, let it go on record that, look, although the committee has decided this, the 2 or 3 of us have resented and are recording that resentment. So I think I would still say that, look, we still need to get a few of those 6-7 bearded sisters who are prepared to stand on the side of what's right.
In this parliament, you'll not even get audience. You'll not even speak if you are one of them.
No, actually, even if you don't get a chance to speak, Ken, nothing stops you from recording. At least you'll be in the Hansard, and the media would pick it up. That Mheshimiwa Odege here, or my good friend Mheshimiwa Samuel, did resent, and it's recorded. And then, of course, they can...
But of what value will that resentment be?
It would help Kenyans to know that this was not a unanimous decision. So anybody else who is it may even help the DCI, the DPP, to further interrogate and investigate that if there are questions here, then there are leads we need to follow. But also it brings me to a fundamental issue. I know there are some who have been agitating for us to go parliamentary system. In a situation where we can't then trust parliament, that for parliament doesn't have what it takes to keep the executive on check effectively. What would it mean if we went purely parliamentary? It would be much worse, perhaps. And perhaps, like Mheshimiwa Pogisio, I'm one of those who supports a hybrid system, which we need to think through very well. But one answer to it is proportional representation, mixed member proportional representation, so that people would be voting on the basis of a party, not individuals. So a member who goes in through that proportional representation would work to defend the party position, not an individual's position. So I think that's the way, as some people are talking about constitutional reforms and so on. If we have to go that route, I would be one of those who would severely oppose a parliamentary system for the reasons we are already seeing, that parliament does not have the impetus and the locus to keep on check effectively the executive. But lastly, on this...
With the hindsight on what he says about parliament, don't you believe that the parliament post the handshake is a parliament that is desirable?
Yes.
With the hindsight now, don't you believe?
There is no denying, Ken. The handshake was a godsend. And Kenyans need to very religiously protect it. I'm one of those who very religiously, to the best of my effort, protect it, because it's the best thing that has happened to Kenya in a long time. And if we miss it, we have a unique opportunity to get the Kenya we want, TKWW, the Kenya we want, if we handle this transition well. But I'm also glad that in the 9-point agenda that the President and the former Prime Minister talked about, fighting graft was one of the things. But when earlier on I was saying I'm hoping that we're not also being diverted from other issues, I meet a number of friends and colleagues who are very comfortable talking about fight against graft, but very uncomfortable talking about ukabila, which is the other equally important problem we have.
Okay.
In fact, in this regard, if I connect it with corruption, I've seen cases where some leaders are saying, oh, our community is being targeted and so on. I think the first question that we ask is, what's the proportion of your community in those positions? I am alive coming from a community that has been marginalized, perhaps from independence. In recent times, we're being told, just go look where there is somebody from this community, and we'll get him or her out and put our own person. So the main task was you find out where there are people from certain unwanted communities. So maybe there are overrepresentation of certain communities, which shouldn't be the case. I think in this particular regard, what I keep encouraging my friends and our appeal I make to Kenya and to government, any time you make public appointments, let it be on merit.
Oh yeah, on merit, regardless. And the issue of ethnicity will not feature, because if it's on merit, even however many people come from the same communities, so long as it's on merit.
Of course, in that regard, it must also be tampered with equity and diversity. Okay. So that you have a face of Kenya.
It's a tough balancing act. All right, gentlemen, let's talk about the recovery, because EACC says they have recovered so far 500 million shillings only. 500 million. They say another 2.1 billion is in their radar. Is this even something that you should talk about? And then you ask them, where is this money? Where has it? We have recovered it. We are putting it back in the fight, you know. And as you talk about that, talk about the fact that you spoke about the British bringing in expatriates, right? Or experts to help fighting graft. Of what value and at what cost? Right, Tom.
Okay, you know, like
the recovery fast.
Today you have what you have pointed out from the today's standard when we are talking about.
This is Sunday standard.
Sunday standard.
Yes.
When we are talking about 368 billion.
Yes.
And
in 5 years.
Then we need not to take pride of 500 million. That's nothing.
Exactly.
That's nothing, and it's not even worth mentioning.
Even the 2.1 billion.
It's not even worth mentioning, because the money we are talking about, which is outside there, is too huge, and 500 million is a drop, which I don't think should attract anything. But getting support from outside, me, I welcome it. I know it might not be free, but when you look at our way of working, and when you look at now the pronouncement in the press, this thing will make a lot of noise and we'll lose it. So we need to strengthen it, and we make this fight real. Because when we start ethnicize it, then you'll find somebody who is looking for votes will develop cold feet and say, now if this thing is threatening my votes, then it's not good for me. But if we make it a working system, which people with no political interest in our country are brought in, I think we can go somewhere.
Okay.
Well, we need to think about the role of our central bank, for example, in its oversight over banks, because apparently now, as you know, banks have also been roped in this corruption thing. But I want to agree with my colleague Odege that the mention of recovery is against such a huge amount which has been lost. The mention that it's like you've lost 1,000 shillings. And now you're recovering 20 shillings, 30 shillings.
I think it's 20 cents.
30 cents, something like that. Yes. And then you're making this. However, just to defend those organs that are fighting, recovery is a new thing. And I think the efforts being made are good. Now they need to enhance the tools and the technology required to actually trace and recover. So let's clap for small achievements, because hitherto it's been very difficult to get even started. And so, but that is not enough. We should be able to say we've recovered a small amount. We're still going after this amount. Let us know what you're going after.
We just saying it's 2.1.
Yeah, exactly. No, but we should be hearing those figures in the billions, in hundreds of billions, not just so that we can encourage them. We clap for those few steps which have been made, a few recoveries which have been made, but also to encourage them to seek help in getting tools that will help them then recover more.
Thank you.
This may be a very minority position and very unpopular position to take. Could it be that when we talk of 368 billion was lost, that that's really not a fact? Maybe only 100 billion was actually lost. I mean, that's turning just the coin around. That could it be every claim that's being made about graft is not genuine and authenticated and could be an element of witch hunt? I don't know. But I'm saying that's a possibility, because I say this, if it was true this money is lost, it has to be somewhere.
Somewhere, exactly.
So it doesn't need to take so long to identify, locate where it is. So that's another side, a narrative, of course, which I know Kenyans wouldn't want to hear, but one that we must.
But it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, you can't just lose 360 billion shillings in the air and you can't find it somewhere. It has to be somewhere.
That's true.
It has to be somewhere.
That's true. Secondly, related to this, and Mheshimiwa Odege was talking about, you know, people are concerned about their votes, ethnic profiling, and so on and so forth. Again, I keep going back to the proportional representation. For me, I think it will cure a lot of Kenya's political problems. Because if you are part of a party, you wouldn't care so much about you as an individual being re-elected, but you would care about your party and the people, your party being re-elected and the people. And to that extent, you would care a little less about the person, the individual. So this is an area that Kenyans need to think about very seriously, that perhaps that way we will be able to get leaders who talk for the good, not just of their own, to preserve their seats, but for the good of maybe their communities by extension, but most of their supporters and their political parties. So I think that's something we need to think about very seriously.
Okay. And just to add that in this fight, as I can see, a bit of politics coming in, or a lot of politics coming in. I think this trying to say that there is tribal profiling and so on, it's really just a shot at trying to stop this thing which is already moving. You know, throwing arrows at a train which has already taken off won't help very much, because I do believe that we need to address the underlying issues before we think it's our tribe. You know, so who put these people there? How are they appointed? Who is the appointing authority? And how come, and this is the question, very simple, how come then you are, from this organization, you are number 1, 2, 3 to 10, or number 1, 2, and 3? Because when you say that's the house where corruption lives, and you say let's shoot at that house, now you know how were you found in that house? You know, we were aiming at the house, and you happened to be there. How come? So we do think that in this fight we should not really politicize it. I think if somebody has been, a lot of the people, I remember the president saying, "I'm losing friends." So you know, it's true, because sometimes you have to lose friends in this fight. And I do believe that every one of us should be then prepared to say, hey, my friend, and then you have to justify without saying it's from my tribe, because we didn't know. We're now finding out it's from your community after they have been named. Otherwise, if they had not been named,
you don't know.
We would not have known who they are.
Yeah. Okay. It's something interesting, but I'd like to bring another aspect of this discussion. The seizure and freezing of assets. And I want to relate it with what happened last week with the DPP. And I like also your comment on this. The DPP was in Naivasha for the training of the county head prosecutors. And one of the things that he talked about is the Friday arrests. And he said he will not stop because even traditionally, the rounding up of vijana used to happen on Friday. So what is new? Is it that you're making noise because it's the big shots? Aside from that, they talked about changing the law that protects, or relooking at the law that protects the suspects. And this is in the rights of an accused person to self-incriminate. So you cannot declare, for example, if I look at the case of Waiguru, Raila Odinga and Waiguru, one of the things that Raila Odinga wanted from Waiguru is for her to show the court how she acquired her wealth over the time she was at devolution. And Waiguru declined this, and the court agreed with her, said that she did not have to do it. So one of the things that the DPP is going for, looking at this law that protects the accused persons, is they're trying to find a way where you need to be compelled to declare how you obtained your wealth. So if you look at that, relate it, gentlemen, with the seizure and freezing of assets, and the fact that the DPP also want the people who are suspected, like the governors, the top officials, to be locked out of their offices and not to be paid salaries. Let me begin with you once again, Tom.
You know, when you talk about wealth of an individual can easily be traced, because this is not something you would go to the lake and use your bowl and draw it as water. It's something you grow over time. And even if it came out of the jackpot, you could show where the jackpot is. So by now trying to compel people to declare their wealth, I think that one is allowed. The only area which I think might not be very fair to the suspects, this idea of looking for a way of, like, let's say this Friday arrest, the example he was giving was not qualified at all, because he's having all the days when he can do whatever he wants. So if you keep somebody inside the whole weekend up to Monday, it's amount to intimidation. But if you have evidence of a person, and you can produce evidence, you can arrest on a Monday, you can arrest any day, even on a Saturday if you want. But it should not be used as an excuse.
Which they have done, Mheshimiwa. Yeah. They arrest any other day, but the prominence has been given to the Friday arrest.
Yeah, so with him also, let him also not try to exchange with people about the Friday ones.
But what is wrong with arresting people on Friday?
On Friday,
yes.
If you're arrested on Friday evening,
yes,
you know very well this person is timing you to be inside
over the weekend.
All weekend.
But what is wrong with that?
What's wrong with that is that when you arrest somebody and you have evidence, someone is supposed to be produced in court
within 24
within 24 hours.
Yes.
You are denying this person is right.
But it's the same thing that they'll arrest you on Monday and decide to arraign you in court on Wednesday. What is the problem?
That one is still wrong, because when you are going for somebody, you should go when you know. Okay, there are areas when you can say this person might be interfering with the investigation on ABCD, but it should not be made tradition whereby arrests are only done
on Friday. So you don't advocate for the Friday
on seizure of assets.
Yes,
I don't think it's wrong. If you are convinced those assets were acquired illegally, then the state have a right to take them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Freezing of bank accounts and all, you agree?
Yeah. You know, the bank account, like now, if somebody is suspected of corruption, you can easily transfer that money somewhere else. So for that money to be kept safe until they are convinced it's yours or it's for someone else, it's good to be kept safe.
But Moish, these people don't keep this money in the bank account, do they? I don't think they keep this money in the bank account.
Some who are not aware of how they can be traced in the bank can still use the bank.
Okay.
But the senior corrupt ones, those who have graduated in corruption, I'm told they now have some pits
in their homes.
In their homes where they keep
containers, they keep the money.
They keep them in dollars.
Okay. Yeah. Senator.
Yeah. So these pits and monies. That's why technology is important for tracing. So if you see people coming to your compound, they're just tracing for monies dug underground. I think that's what you should have equipment that can trace. Yeah. I want to suggest that we take up the three main enemies of our development, which I think corruption is top of it. Then there is this Ukabila, and they seem to be meeting at some point. At this point now, the Ukabila and corruption are meeting. What was the other one? It is impunity. Because impunity is simply doing something because you can do it. And when we see a lot of that, you just do it because you can do it. And let me tell you, on the roads that we are seeing today, some of the roads, you know, will be looking very nice now. By a month's time, you start seeing the road deteriorate. And we have this kind of thing. So we are going to see the effects of corruption. We're going to feel it a bit more because of the contracts that have been awarded and the people who are doing shoddy jobs on our roads, shoddy jobs on our water projects. I mean, imagine a water project with shoddy materials, shoddy everything. So we're going to see a lot more there. So as you trace these things, let's think also where the money is going. Let's find out from experts from other places. I agree with the area that some people have done this more. The people who are good at tracing, let's use them. Let's get expertise from other countries. But let's train ourselves. I think also training parliamentary committees is very important. We have, and also, you know, our county assembly committees. We need to train them. We need to train people even on how to approve candidates, for example. Because these are the people who come through us. We approve them. And if the questions are not related to the possibility of them going to be corrupt, then we just clear them. And we clear them on the basis that maybe because of our majority position, okay? But I think from the very beginning, when we get somebody to be a CEO, before we jail them, which is happening today, we should at least be able to know who they were before they became CEOs. Properly know. Let's know what kind of, can they declare what they were, what they have, so that when they become CEOs, we can easily find out how far they have moved. But also, why is it easy to steal money from government? That's the biggest question. Why has it become so easy to steal money from public monies? Is it that our systems are so weak? What is it within internal auditors within the ministries? Is it that our systems have become so weak that it's just easy to get money out? It used to be so difficult. What has made it so easy? So we need also to tighten those positions. But at the same time, let's not remove life from our Kenyans. I think the biggest thing is to have our quality lives, the quality of our lives improved. So corruption is being fought, but should not also take away from the optimism of our people. Let's not kill the optimism of our people. Let's strengthen the hard work that they have and the energies that they have, so that they can actually continue to produce more. Let corruption not slow down our growth, because we need to grow as a people, as a nation.
Okay. All right. You can comment, Dr. Then we'll get back to the fact that the DPP is now thinking of the law that is protecting the suspect.
Yeah. I think for us to succeed in fighting graft, we have to have phased approach. Maybe 2 or 3 phases. There is the immediate short term. And what we are seeing happening today goes a long way towards realizing that. But we must also have a long-term strategy. This means instilling value systems so that, which is so eloquently captured already in Article 10 of our Constitution. Can we embrace those values? Can we inculcate them? Can we have them in our educational curricula, right from early childhood through primary up to university, so that we know that, integrity and the name is more important than almost anything else. I think the value system is lacking. That's for the long term. For the immediate term, I think I would probably give, in my own assessment, the DPP 85% or 90% of marks for work well done, but there's a 10% I would deny him. I think in as much as obviously there must be justice. Fairness and justice do not just mean that when somebody is prosecuted and convicted, that's when justice has been delivered. Justice and fairness means that, yes, those who are culpable and guilty, let them pay for their guilt. But equally, those who are innocent should not be witch-hunted. I remember also, I think in the same week, this past week, a court did rule that, it can be very damaging when people's names are called, they're dragged through mud, and it turns out that at the end of the day, they were not guilty. The damage has already been done.
Yes.
And it's probably a lifetime damage that's done. So we must be very careful. Having worked in Rwanda, for somebody to have been fingered, in the state organs would have done a thorough job to the extent that when the matter goes to court, there is hardly any way that that person would escape. So when you, that's part of why we were saying this 368 billion, how much of it truly has disappeared? I think that's a question we must interrogate. We should not just be rushing to have people drag them to court before doing sufficient, thorough, proper investigation. Part of why I say this, and I keep using the case of John Gakuo, it's very unfortunate. He died in prison. Partly because maybe an officer of the court who was very enthusiastic to quickly swing him in, even when his lawyers were saying, look, this guy is unwell, he requires medical attention, just thought that, no, this is usual culprits trying to play around with the law so that they get comfort. I think we should not be overzealous. We should give, even until somebody is proven guilty, let's assume they're innocent. And even the guilty ones have rights. Let's protect those rights. It's in that regard I don't agree with DPP when he says, when he makes certain suggestions. I agree with him in some. For example, when he talks of people who are seriously incriminated and charged, depending on offices they hold, they should step aside. In that regard, I fully agree. But let it be captured in law. And this is where I was mentioning to Mheshimiwa Dege that even though we have certain laws, there are certain areas where there are still gaps. And this is one of them where there's a gap. The point is, it should not be subjective that in the case of so-and-so, we wanted her or him to step aside. But what has been the precedent?
But in public service, it's automatic. You go home, half pay and all. So these are, I mean, they are constitutional office holders, those people who have protection in law. And basically, he's targeting the governors.
Right.
And this looks really suspect, especially if you look at it, the fact that he is now prosecuting the DCJ. It looks...
Yes, actually, I wanted to say the governors, the judiciary, and so on and so forth. I think I fully agree. It's only that we are saying, look, for now, for public servants, there's already a system, guidelines to do that. But it's a gray area, it's a lacuna when it comes to the other offices.
Okay, top.
Can I say something in 1 minute?
Yes.
There is an area which you need to look into very deeply. When you look at the affected parastatals or state agencies and the CEOs who are affected, we need also to investigate how these people manage to be in these offices. Because most of them, when you look at them, you'll find they were rushed into those positions. Some of them don't have clear experience and qualification to hold those jobs. So it's like...
but they're approved by Parliament?
No, some of them are not parliamentary approval, don't need parliamentary approval.
Like which one, Tom? Most of these big positions are approved.
CEO of NHIF will never come to Parliament.
For approval?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's agree. Some of, when you look at the people, most of the people affected, some of them were politically rushed into the position, and we end up with people who are not really mature for the job.
Okay.
I want to give you an example of, okay, even though people are making a lot of noise about this tribal, our community is targeted, you look at Kenyatta before Koros, Kenyatta National Hospital.
Okay. Before Lilian Koros,
was a perfect hospital. When Koros came in, he brought that hospital down. But Koros was rushed into that position when there were so many senior doctors to occupy that post. And if you go to Kenyatta currently, Kenyatta is ailing. But when this Samburu guy, Lesiermpe, was in Kenyatta, Kenyatta was a perfect hospital. So when you look at the kind of the CEOs we have, some of them are being served before being well cooked. We serve raw food.
They're not fully cooked.
Yeah, okay. So we need also to look at the background of these people. Some of them were asked to which they never deserve to occupy.
Okay, gentlemen, I'd like you to weigh in on the fact that last week on Friday, if I'm not wrong, the DPP said now they want to relook at this law on asset. They want to, how do you, this is a fundamental human, I think it's chapter 19 of the Constitution. I don't know, Article 19, I don't know how they're going to do this. How you want to go, because this supports must, cuts across every person, whether you're a suspect, regular Kenyan. How are they going to go around this?
Around the asset?
Around, yes, around the No, the protection, that the suspects have in the Constitution, the right not to self-incriminate. How do you go against it? How do you go around it, rather?
Let me have maybe first go on this one. And I think that the DPP and his team of lawyers, and who has a right to, he has a right, of course there's precedent in all law. And I'm sure that where this law applies in Kenya, they can find a place where it has succeeded and been prosecuted, which means they can always borrow from international best practice and so on. So it's possible for them to look at all this entire thing that we think is difficult in getting around and piece it together using international legal best practice, wherever, and also precedents, wherever it has happened. And so if with all our big expertise in law here, with all our lawyers, we should be able then to do, if it means doing an amendment within or creating laws to support this constitutional statement, this constitutional amendment that we're talking about, we should then be able to do it so that we can allow the DPP to be able to not circumvent but legally help, because to self-incriminate is protected, but there are ways in which, if you are really facing investigation, that they should be able to put aside certain of your rights so that you can be investigated. And those are the ones which must be put in legal terms. And the lawyers could help us with that. Okay. But I think that with borrowing from experts from outside and also from international best practices, we should be able to get around it.
Okay, but don't you think by doing this, the feeling is that they don't really know what to do? Because as you mentioned, gentlemen, and you all agree at the beginning of this discussion, is that Kenya is not short of good laws. We have good laws, but what we lack is implementation. So even with what we have, must we go this way?
We have good laws, but we require a rider. That there are still a few areas where there are gaps, and this is one of them. So yes, even though we have pretty good laws, I don't think we'd claim that we have 100% of the laws and regulations that we require. There are still a few gaps, and those are the gaps we need to plug in. But having said that, I'd wanted to revisit also the issue of Friday arrests.
Okay.
I think I cannot belabor sufficiently about it, that everybody's rights need to be protected. Need we make arrests, for example, dramatic? Unless we're just playing to the gallery. I think at the end of the day, and this in my view should be there, with due respect to the DCI and the DPP, the preoccupation should be the first one is to protect public resources. That should be the prime fact. The second one should be deliver justice, okay? So when you are meant to deliver justice, playing to the public gallery so that you dramatize arrests, you make sure you swing people in over the weekend just to make a point, I really think that's the wrong way, in my view, to go. It shouldn't matter if it falls that on a Friday. We shouldn't, of course, on the other hand, also say that, look, if it happens that that's the day you're meant to be arrested, it shouldn't be. But it shouldn't seem like that we are targeting particularly that day to make arrests. This used to happen in the Moi days, particularly for politicians who are not compliant, that he would, just to embarrass the politicians, he would look for you, or these people would look for you on Fridays. I think that itself is also negative. Negative justice is also wrong.
Okay.
So let's not be overzealous. Let's arrest as if it falls on a Friday that you arrest somebody, so be it. But it shouldn't be a practice that's the day that you want to arrest. Maybe that's another area where we need a regulation, so that's clear under what circumstances do we do that, so that we don't just do it to make a point.
I just saw the other day a classmate of mine from law school obtained orders from the court barring the DPP from parading suspects with the placards written the names and the crime. And he obtained the orders. All right, as we end, we have about 10 minutes on the clock. I said I want to talk about Sunday Nation and Sunday Star. I'd like to end with Sunday Nation. And Sunday Nation talk about State House caught up in fake tender saga. I mean, it's interesting. Latest arrests, court cases and investigations exposed alleged fraud by shadowy figures believed to have operated from inside Kenya's heavily guarded seat of power. That's the deputy president's office and military headquarters. Detectives want to know how this happened. Now, there are 3 suspects that have been put on the front page. One is Frederick Mangala Muhanji, who says whose victims claim he had access to State House and deputy president's office, right? And was arrested in connection with fake tenders. Second one is Kihoro Mondi, who's accused with others of defrauding Idris Ahmed of 23 million shillings worth of laptops. You remember the laptops? Yeah, I remember the laptops and the phones, the deputy president. And the last one, very interesting, this guy is called Eric Otieno Atanga. But now he has an alliance. It's called Colonel Kiprotich, and has been charged Kiambu law courts for obtaining 40 million shillings from one Charles Gidhi in connection with a fake military tender. Now, the most amazing thing is how bold these people are. You operate in the office of the president, you operate from State House, and you operate from the deputy president's office. Gentlemen, let me begin with Tom.
First, let's agree that cartels do exist. And you cannot bar cartels from operating even up to the highest house possible. But again, you'll also agree with me that when you look at the funds allocated at the presidency, there are high chances of people now trying to get those monies. And maybe when you look at the 3, the connections they're enjoying cannot just be from nowhere. These are people who are just being used inside there to help their bosses there make money. It's only that maybe the deal has gone sour, but I still strongly believe corruption is also pitching tent in that big office there.
Okay, Senator.
You need to know that these offices are run like just any other ministry, and the procurement is the same. People who do procurement are the same people who would work under any other ministry. And there are people now who would want to use the big names to get tenders. You know, tenders are very, very lucrative in this country. And there are people who are gatekeepers to tenders. And so they can be the ones. I don't know about these guys who have been arrested, and I'm sure they are not the only ones. I'm sure there are many, many people who do these things. It just spoils a bad name. But I agree with Odege in the fact that the budgets that go into these offices are so huge and so attractive to to these guys who are called tenderpreneurs and the gatekeepers in tenders in procurement. And so we know that this is the source, a lot of it, source of the corruption. But we should. I'm glad, when the veil is actually when taken, when the veil is lifted, you can now see. And during investigation, you might find that these are probably people who work for other bigger people and things like that, because you cannot access some of these offices, by the way, unless you have a badge.
A badge, yes.
Yes, unless you have. So
and you're known. Even if you have a badge, you must be known.
Yes. So it is amazing. We know each other so well in case Kenyans that I'm sure an ordinary person will tell you who these people are truly. And so investigations should find quickly, finish these kind of things and discourage this kind of people so that tenders are fair and free. See, now the problem is, they say there are tenders are open, but really these are the people who are gatekeepers. Make it difficult for you to go through and make it easy for you to go through and so on. And
some are not even gatekeepers. Dr. Before you comment, I'd like to read something here, just a small excerpt from the story on page 4 of the Sunday Nation. Mr. Charles Gadi Nganga, a victim, is counting losses of about 240 million shillings after he was awarded in quotes a fake tender to supply computers to State House and the Department of Defense between January and September. That's on page 4. According to his statement to the police that will be the subject of court case, Gadi, the director of Microhouse Technology, was approached by one Douglas Simiu, who detectives have unmasked as Mr. Mangala, I mentioned him before, masquerading as a National Intelligence Service officer based in Nairobi's Nyati House. Gadi told police that Mr. Simiu informed him of a single-sourced tender to supply 1,200 pieces of HP Envy laptops, which he claimed were needed at State House for security project. Gadi alleges that Simiu took him to an office at State House, and later another one in the second floor of Harambee House Annex. Harambee House Annex, that's the deputy president's, which he was told hosts the presidential delivery unit. In both instances, he claims Mr. Simiyu easily gained access to the protected facilities. So these are not even people who work there.
That's what the senator was telling you.
Yes, yes.
Ken,
yes.
We are Kenyans. It's very unfortunate that graft is becoming part of our system. It's a very unfortunate one, and the sooner we vanquish it from our midst, the better. I must, on one hand, give credit to the fact, the investigative officers, that you are even fingering Office of the President, Office of the Deputy President is commendable, because then it means, it gives comfort to Kenyans that, you know, no matter how high up an office you may be in, you are not, you are still under the law. I think that's commendable, and it's no lesser than head of state himself who did acknowledge, I think it was last year, that there's corruption even at his office.
Yes.
So
he's done that severally.
Yes. So this is something, and it's commendable in my view, that he accepts, he concedes that fact. I think what's incumbent upon the law enforcement agencies is to go much deeper and bring people who are culpable like this, let them answer the law just like anybody else who is suspected to be a criminal. But at the end of the day, Ken, I think if we want to remove corruption totally in our midst, I'm one firm believer in national dialogue and conversation. There are things people must be able to come to the table and talk about freely. I do know, again, that's a very unpopular position. Kenyans would say, no, how do you talk about corruption? You know,
yes.
But before you get to the stage of terming it corruption, you need to go through that due process to know that, yes, this is a case that merits corruption. But the way it is here, I'm glad the prosecution is happening. It means that the administrators at the concerned offices also need to do much more. These peddlers of tender peddlers and so on and so forth must be vanquished. But it also it's also, in my view, an indictment on the public procurement oversight bodies that. And again, maybe it's a case of, they may say they don't have sufficient capacity. When we talk of adding them capacity in terms of technical expertise and legal expertise and resources, perhaps we need to strengthen them. And again, parliaments are all here to play, giving them more resources so that they can do a thorough job to make sure that whether it's at State House or one ministry or in the county government, that people do things the right way. Okay. But at the end of the day, it must be in our value system.
All right. We have a few minutes on the clock, gentlemen. I'd just like us to close this discussion. And as we close, I'll begin with Tom once again for your closing comments. I'd like to know, in your view, is our laws punitive enough? And what has been done so far? What, at the end of the day, giving 2 years, 3 years, 4 years in jail, will it be too punitive, or we need to start thinking, because this is something that the president even said, you want me to go and arraign them at Uhuru Park and shoot them? You remember that comment from the president? So do you think our laws are punitive enough, or we should go the Japan way? As we close, Tom, let's get a minute or so.
Okay, on corruption, we need to give it a two-way approach. First, we seriously target recovery, because we need this wealth back for the people of Kenya to enjoy it. Then now the sentencing can follow, but the sentencing now, even whether it's 1, 2 to 3 years, so long as we have managed to recover something back or what you have stolen back, I think if we give it two approaches, it will favor both our economy and also serve you right for having stolen from the public.
Which means recovery, you're talking about all the assets of these suspects.
If you
everything, your homes,
everything. If you have known the worth of what you have stolen, and we can easily trace it and find out something which we can take in return, we take it so that we compensate the loss.
Because this money is too much. It's not about soup and corn. It's more about buildings and property.
Because if you jail me for 2 years and you leave the fortune to my family, there is no loss.
You've done nothing. Okay. Senator.
Yeah, we are not reinventing the wheel in our lawmaking. This is universal Commonwealth and universal lawmaking. And I mean, universal, yes, laws. The laws are universal, I guess. That's what, but I'm just saying that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can actually use the existing laws to create the right atmosphere, except we need to send the right message. How badly do we need to, how badly are we trying to stop corruption? And if we really want to stop it today, there are enough laws in our system, in our books, even before we go outside of our own books, to tighten the cases and make sure that the people get exactly justice for what they have done. Okay. The one I'm trying to add is that recovery, because we are not very strong at recovery, we must strengthen that arm and really recover assets.
Okay. And the recovery agency is made of DPP, is made of ESCC, is made of DCI. I mean, they should be able to.
And the AG to add
and the
all.
AG, yes.
But can allow me, this being our final show this year, to wish Kenyans one happy Jamhuri Day, which is just around the corner, but also happy Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I do know we have guests in town, the AU ECOSOC, the Africa Union Economic, Cultural and Social Council is meeting in Nairobi. We welcome them into the city, but also next week we're having guests for the Diaspora Convention. And we look forward to diaspora also making their State of the Nation address, so that, like the forgotten Kenyans, you know, when we talk of procurements being fair and so on, we are even forgetting that there are Kenyans who don't have that opportunity to participate. You are told if you are to apply for a government job, you have to come and take fingerprints. If you are based in, say, Harare or Washington, D.C., you can't take that fingerprint at the Kenyan embassy because the facility is not there. Yet the technology already exists. So they're already disenfranchised, and I wish them well as they'll be coming. They'll also be sharing their thoughts about the Big Four agenda, how the diaspora relate, but also how they partake of the handshake of which they were part of realizing.
All right.
Merry Christmas.
Yes.
Can I just wish the people of West Pokot County Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yeah,
right.
Thank you.
You will also allow me to wish the people of Nyatike and civil servants of the Republic of Kenya.
Right. Okay.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yeah, you still represent the civil servants. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and thank you. And next week on Monday, we'll not be having This Is the Point, but we'll be talking to experts from the diaspora about the forthcoming conference. So 7 to 8, join us here. We'll have that interview, and you'll know what they're going to talk about in the conference and what they're bringing in this country in the value of contribution and all that. Thanks for watching, and thank you, gentlemen, for coming. Have a good morning. And of course, Living with S is up shortly.